Hello, welcome back to Priority Traffic Podcast. I'm your host, Chris. I know it's been a few months since our last episode, so I want to share the reasons for the break. I've been managing some personal wellness challenges while trying to stay operationally prepared and balanced as a husband while simultaneously taking care of my own well-being. I'm doing well now, but the episode you're about to hear initiated a series of events in my life that are still unfolding as you listen. Please enjoy this episode, but be aware that the content is personal and might not be appropriate for all listeners, so keep this in mind if you're listening along with others. A huge thank you to Chief Andy Starnes for taking the time to join us and for being patient as I built up the courage to release this episode. Thank you once again for all of your support. If this episode resonates with you, please consider sharing it and feel free to reach out if there's anything I can do to assist you on your journey. Enjoy the show. In today's episode, we dive into a world where knowledge, dedication, and spirituality converge in the realm of family and firefighting. It's my honor to introduce Battalion Chief Andy Starnes, a name synonymous with passion, innovation, relentless service in the fire industry. Andy's journey began in 1992 as a volunteer, and later in 98 transitioning to a career in full-time firefighting. Throughout his career, Andy has not only combated flames, but ignited the spark of learning and leadership through his extensive work in thermal imaging, fire behavior, and an advisor to both peers and communities alike. Andy's role extends beyond the firehouse. As a significant contributor to fire service literature and educator at fire service conferences globally, Andy's commitment to the advancement of firefighting techniques and safety protocols knows no bounds. His work with Insight Training LLC has propelled the use of thermal imaging training across the United States and beyond, making significant strides in firefighter safety and efficiency. Today, we dare to peel back the layers of this multifaceted firefighting journey, exploring how Andy balances the high stakes of his profession with his spiritual wellness. This conversation promises to offer insight into maintaining inner strength amid the chaos, highlighting the critical role of spirituality in nurturing resilience, teamwork, and leadership at home and in the fire service. Join us in this compelling dialogue with Andy Starnes as we dig into the heart of firefighting, a profession that commands unwavering courage and a profound sense of purpose guided by the light of service and faith. Andy Starnes, welcome to Priority Traffic Podcast.
Wow. Thank you, Chris. That's quite a lot. I didn't expect all that. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I'm just a nobody from nowhere, Monroe, North Carolina, who's fortunate to have had a great journey so far and hope it's not over yet, you know.
Yeah, so far so good. You've had quite the journey, and I know I touched on a little bit of it, but I really had a profound experience when I was looking at your thermal imaging training online, and I started to read about you as the person, and I had never, until the TIC training started coming up in my department, have I heard of you, which only says about me that I haven't done a ton of research, because you are well known and you are out there. But I discovered you in one of your bios, or in one of the offshoots of what you are doing, the bringing back the brotherhood and the ministry into the fire service. And that is what caught my attention. Not to mention I've watched several hours minimum of your TIC training. So I wanted to bring you on and just have a candid conversation about your experience with faith, how it serves you in your time of need, and is kind of the foundation for your principles and your priorities in home life and at the fire station.
That's a big one. We may have to do several parts to this then. Yeah, faith is critical in life, whether you're a believer or not. We all have faith. You have faith that your car is going to crank. You have faith that whoever took care of made your food didn't put poison in it. You have faith that when you go to bed at night that, you know, your house is going to hold up and the roof's not going to leak. You have, you know, what I call temporal or earthly faith. And then you have people like myself who have faith outside of circumstances. And that's the most difficult faith to have, is to believe in things that the world doesn't necessarily believe in, ridicules, mocks, makes fun of for whatever reason. And my purpose today is not to mock or ridicule anyone who doesn't believe or believes different than me. But as for me and my house, I believe in God and Jesus Christ, and that's my journey. And I hope to point others to them. I don't judge. I don't condemn. I just point to them. And if they have a problem with what I believe, I ask them to take it up with the author and read the book and read it from cover to cover. And I'm not the one who has the answers. I'm just a broken instrument that God's used. And I know, as Paul says, I'm chief of sinners. I have no right to point at anyone. I have no right to look down on anyone unless I'm there to help them up. Because this guy right here is full of flaws. Just ask my wife. So I know as I grow older, one of the things I learn more is to become more compassionate and less cynical. A lot of people become more cynical as they age, and I'm becoming more aware of my own flaws and inadequacies. And especially when you separate yourself from the job, that's a big one too. You realize, oh, I'm not the guy going down the hallway anymore. I'm not the one standing out in the front yard commanding the incident. I'm not that one that has that title, So you have to be at home with who you're called to be and what your purpose in life is. As my friend from Crew First Culture, his little band I wear all the time now, says, you are perfectly made for an extraordinary purpose. Well, what is that purpose? And that's up to each individual to decide. But for me, I know that decision was made already. And I had to realize what that was, and hopefully we'll talk about that today, of how we can encourage others like yourself and other firefighters on the journey. Because my motto is I work in the dark. Yeah. I either work in infrared or I work in between the heart and the head, which someone once said, that 14 inches is the longest journey of any human life. Getting this and this to agree with each other, quite difficult. So that's where God's placed me right now. And I can't say that's forever, but for now, I know that's my purpose. That's where I am to work. And I teach both of those things, they marry together, and talk about the things, how we can see the things in each other. We don't need a camera to see something's wrong with someone.
Sure.
And my goal is to point them to help. And whether they choose to believe as I do is up to them and to God. But my goal is to get them to help, is to feed them, to help them, to provide some type of healing, some type of hope, some type of counseling. And then hopefully, this broken instrument can point them to the guy who's really leading the whole orchestra. So,
well, absolutely. I think this is going to be a very enlightening conversation for myself and hopefully for everyone listening. And I plan to use myself as the example in probably more uncomfortable scenarios in this conversation than I would like to, but that is part of my journey. And I've felt this nagging, and we talked previously about this pull to step towards God and faith, and you were that initial beacon for me. It just, the synchronicity of me finding you and making that phone call to invite you on today is proof that I know that something's happening. I'm searching for more, and I know that I can't move into this next phase the same. I have to change. And that's as something I'm embracing educationally, tactically in the fire realm, and at home as an individual. So I'm really excited to have this conversation, brother.
Well, the good news is you've already got the skills to do what you need to do if you're trained as a firefighter. I use the parables of looking at what we already know, and I apply it to our faith and say, all right, we got to size up our situation. And then we got to develop an incident action plan. We got a conditions, actions, needs report. And then we're going to apply these strategies and tactics. And then we're going to report into the IC every so often. We're not going to freelance, right?
Yeah. It's amazing that, because I've, not to that extent, but I have made references for wellness to a fire scene or a fire ground, a home, basically. If you got a fire in your home, you're going to put it out, and each little room is essentially a portion of wellness. Like if there's a fire in your safe, you're going to put that fire out. And that's definitely the concept of the fire service is very, very expansive when it comes to examples of principle.
Well, Exodus chapter 18 has the first example of incident command system in the Bible. Moses is leading all these people through the wilderness, and his father-in-law shows up, and as good parents do, they offer a little wisdom. and he sees Moses sitting there and all these 2 million people lining up to talk to him. And I'm paraphrasing, Starnes paraphrased, so forgive me. He goes, "What are you doing? You know, what you're doing is not good. It's going to wear you out. Well, why are you doing it?" "Well, they come to me and then I inquire to God on their behalf and then I give them solutions." He goes, "No, no, 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 no. You need to appoint valuable, good men, of good character over tens, fifties, hundreds, and thousands, and then let them decide those smaller cases and bring the bigger cases to you." So think about a big fire.
Mm-hmm.
You got the IC, then you got the divisions, and you got the groups, and then see how this works?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So that was mentioned a long time ago. Whether it got the full credit or not, I don't know. But
Sure.
I thought it was rather interesting. Historically, you could find examples of things that already existed. So.
Yeah, and I believe you. I think I can quote you. It's the same problem, just new people. I think you have said that in the past, and
Yep.
that resonated with me. It's like these aren't new problems. I'm not the first one to experience any of these issues, and it boggles my mind why we hide and we feel this shame and guilt about these experiences that we do struggle with, all the while you're not the first person, or I'm not the first person to ever have these setbacks or struggles that I'm having. And we think we are, and we think we're alone. And that's one thing I want people to understand is we're not. And there's no shame in reaching your hand out for help if you are in a position that you need it.
There's two kinds of pride that you have to watch out for. One that the fire service talks about, pride in the job, pride in that.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a sneaky one that comes in there, and it can actually hurt us because when we get to that point where we don't want to ask for help, or
Mm-hmm.
we feel like we've been wronged, or we're hopeless and we blame God, that's a personal pride. Like, you did this to me, I'm not going to ask for help because I don't want nobody to know.
Right.
It's an I problem. And I is the center letter of that word sin. Nobody likes that word.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, the majority of our problems, I can point back to myself. There's an old saying that says, if I point at you like this, if I flip it over, there's 3 fingers pointing back at me. So I have to be very careful what I point out, because in general, we don't like to be the one asking for help. We're the servant.
Right.
We like to provide. We don't like to receive in that respect. And there's a servant song that says, "Let me have the grace to let you be my servant too." And the hypocritical nature of the fire service is quite interesting, that you and I would not have had a job, or you have a job, without someone calling for help.
Right.
Yet when we need help, we refuse to. So you said that a little bit ago, that you talking about me being a beacon. Who are we denying their God-given calling to help us by simply sitting and suffering in silence because of our personal pride, because we won't ask for help? This person that God may have made or appointed or went through a specific circumstance that could, divinely appointed to talk to you, may never get to talk to you and I because of our personal pride. It's like, I call it the prison we create.
Sure.
We're sitting in a cell with an open door, and we refuse to step out that door. And he'll provide the answer.
Yeah.
But the thing I've learned about him is he will not force himself on you. He will not make you do anything. He will set circumstances in your life, but you have to physically choose to be on his team, to move his way, to walk with him, because he's not going to force you. He loves you that much, and that's the thing, is our pride really, as human beings in general, gets in the way of us receiving help, helping others, so many things. It actually makes us feel hopeless, because the key thing there is we're relying on ourselves. And if I've learned anything at this part of life, is just like that, everything I have could be taken from me. My health, my finances, everything. And I could be completely, utterly destitute. But I know right now, Chris, that if I would humble myself, seek his face, and ask for help, I have enough friends that he's put in my life that I would never have to worry about a meal. I would never have to worry about a roof over my head. I would not live a comfortable life, but my family would be cared for until we could find a way. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty big comfort, to know that if everything I had was taken from me, that there are people who care about us that much, that would give me a place to stay, provide for my wife and daughter until we figure things out. And I think that's what people have to realize is I have to get I got to get me out of the way. You know, I really do. And that's, I'm talking myself. I'm not going to preach at anybody else, but
Sure.
when you talk about that, asking for help or seeking out that guidance, you got to seek it. You got to, I mean, as a young firefighter, you probably wanted a mentor to guide you, right?
And that is something I've considered, and I've met plenty of people through the podcast, and it's like definitely something I want and need, and it's not always available in the capacity that I'm me personally that I'm looking for, and there's not a lot of people talking about the stuff that we're talking about, so it's hard to find that.
Well, I can help you with that as we progress in. There's a couple of questions you asked about that.
I have a feeling. I have a feeling. So real quick before we get too far forward into all this, did you have a big influence with faith in God when you were young as a child? Because I'm 38, or I'm sorry, 38, and I didn't have a lot of that influence, and I've learned a lot about myself in the last 10 years, basically since joining the fire service. And I find myself maybe not vacant in that area, but yearning for something that I didn't have.
No, that's a clean slate. That's a great place to be, to know that you don't have any preconceived notions. A lot of people don't want to go that way because they've had a bad experience, right? They grew up in a bad environment, or they had a church experience that was horrible, and I don't wish that on anybody. But for me, I grew up in a community where you could throw a rock and hit a church.
Right.
You know, we were a farm community, and there was churches on every corner. That's why they call it the Bible Belt, right? You know, they're everywhere. Doesn't mean they were good church, but there was churches. And where my house sat was like my grandmother's house, my house, the preacher's house, and you could see the church looking out my bedroom window. Like, you want to talk about not wanting to get in trouble? The pastor's next door, the church is over there, and the cemetery is on the hill if you get in trouble, right? So, and I grew up in it was a small Methodist church that my great whatever grandfather, Valentine Starnes, gave to them in the 1700s. As it was like a tent meeting, campground type church to start with. And, you know, obviously over 200 something years old, you can go out there and see tombstones out in the woods that are, you know, from the Civil War. But, you know, I went there on Sundays, went to Sunday school as a kid, and accepted Christ at age 14. But I had a religion. I went to church. You were told to be good. This is why, end of story. We prayed over meals, but there was no Bible study in the house. There was no, hey, this is what this means. No, Bible says that. That's it. And I'm like, that really didn't sit well with me. You know, because what do young people do? We question everything. They think millennials started that. No, all kids, you have little kids, they'll ask you, why? You know, so when I got into youth group, that helped some. I had a really good youth group, had an amazing family, that the Belt family that took care of us. Patsy and them were just amazing. But I don't think my heart was open to it. I still think, you know, being a teenager and wrong desires and easily distracted, that kind of thing. And another thing was I was a scrawny kid, didn't get attention. Like you were talking about, didn't get attention in that. I didn't get attention from anybody. I was not popular. It was academic. And, you know, artistic and academic, not the baseball player my dad wanted as a son. So my outlet was when, you know, to go to the fire department and to try to prove myself that way. And I saw faith in that. I saw good people doing things. But there's also the dark side of the fire service. But not until I got married and my wife and I both grew up in church did I think our journey really began. Because we had the title of Christian. We didn't have any depth. It's like being 1,000 miles wide and 2 inches deep.
Right.
You know, I read a quote this morning. I wrote one of my devotionals. And it's from D.L. Moody. He said, if I want to know if a man's a Christian, I'm not going to ask his minister. I'm going to ask his wife. Because if he can't treat his wife right, then he's definitely not walking in the faith. So for me, when my wife and I got married, we moved here to Shelby, which is way from where I started. And that's where God put certain things in our life. I call them divine appointments. People call them coincidences. And that's where our journey began. That's where I started learning about relationship over religion, rule-based groups versus, hey, God wants to have a relationship with you, and this is what this is about. Doesn't mean you have to be perfect. He sent his perfect son. That's it. You have to do your part, and you have to answer that call you were talking about and move forward with that. And you have to do it every day. I wish I could say it's an easy road. It's not. If you read the Bible, you'll learn. It's not. It's not a prosperity gospel like people think. But that was my beginning, and then I got married in my late 20s, and probably at age 31 was when my wife and I rededicated our lives. There's 2 trees planted right outside my window for that purpose for Sarah and I.
Nice.
We did that then, and they're quite tall now.
So when you got into the fire service, you already had a little bit of an established, what we'd call faith from growing up. What would you say as far as getting in the fire service at 22? That's young, as far as most people go. What were the demands like in your impression? How prepared were you for the job physically and mentally? I know nowadays we talk about resilience and there's a lot of buzzwords floating around, but we see the demands and the toll it actually takes on us. And it was likely similar in your experience, but how prepared were you physically, mentally, and then spiritually for what your experience kind of unfolded to you?
I was very one-sided because I grew up in a small town. I was a scrawny kid, wasn't in shape, so I got beat up in school. So in high school, I decided, no more of that.
Right.
So I worked out all 7th, 8th grade into high school, got into powerlifting, all that. So that kind of helped me a lot because when I first got on the hose line at 13 years old, it looked like the cartoon. It flew me around like nothing. I didn't have enough butt to hold it down. When I met Aaron Fields years ago, I said, where you been my whole life? I've been fighting hose instead of fighting fire. He taught me the art of moving a hose line. I had 10 or 12 years into the job when I met him. I'm like, where have you been?
Yeah, for real.
But then I got into the fitness side of it because of, I don't know if you'd call it a healthy coping mechanism. It was more of a self-esteem thing.
Sure.
And trying to get even with people who had hurt me, which was not a good motivation because, I'm not a violent person. And, but I did use that, unfortunately, in school. It did not pay off well to my benefit, by the way. But I did use that. And then when I finally got the option to start participating, realized that physical fitness was a big deal for me. So when I got the process after age 18, when I graduated high school, I started applying. So I was working at gyms and different places to keep myself accountable. Sure. And right before I got hired, I was a trainer at the YMCA. So I used that to my advantage to get myself ready. But then I realized really quickly, it doesn't matter how much I can bench press. It doesn't matter how much I can squat. I got to run and then throw that ladder, Yeah. So it was a stamina thing. I'm like, oh, this is not good. I'm done in 12 minutes and they're still going, So, and I got to do this for 26 weeks. So I got ready that way. So when I came into recruit school, I was physically ready, but not mentally, emotionally, spiritually ready. I moved out, got my own apartment. I'm a small town. Now I'm living in a city. I work, I'm going to work Monday through Friday doing recruit school. And then when I got out, I go to my first station. And that was major culture shock because I'm used to a volunteer fire department and I'm at an engine ladder house in a slower area to start with, but still busier. You got to consider where I grew up, we ran maybe 200 calls a year. Okay. And this was a slow company running 1,500 calls a year. So, I'm like, okay, this is different. The ICS was different. Having 4 people on an engine or ladder, I'm used to having nobody. The whole structure, who does what, being the rookie, keeping your mouth shut and all that. And relearning what I had already learned as a volunteer in a career department was quite a transition, but it took me about a year. But initially, when I got hired, talking about your faith was not a bad thing in 1998. Right. It wasn't looked down upon. It wasn't like today where you're politically, personally persecuted if you go online. If you got a fire department shirt on and you go on and say, I love Jesus, whatever, good luck. They're going to come after you hard. Whereas back then it wasn't really that big of a deal. But I know I got to live through the transition where we went from that to more politically correct world. But I was not ready, A, for the city life, B, learning the tactics and how all these trucks respond and all that stuff. I wasn't ready for that. And it took me a good year of just listening, learning, working. I worked a lot of overtime shifts, shift trades, trying to just saturate myself because I'm 22, 23 years old.
Right.
I don't know anything. By the way, I bought my first house at that age too. I had no blinds in the windows, a grill in the yard, my TV was on a box, and I had a mattress in the floor. That's how wealthy I was. I was
Right.
making
You were doing it.
$24,000 a year starting salary.
Oh,
So let's say I worked a lot. But I wasn't prepared for that. I don't think anybody is. I think my parents had prepared me for life skills like paying bills, taking care of myself. I could change a tire, cut the grass, do all that stuff that a lot of people can't do today. But I was not ready for people. I was not ready for somebody challenging my faith. None of that. I was not. And that's why I say that you can say this however you want, but I live by a 3-word phrase.
yeah.
Broken, crushed, qualified. You can't be that third one unless you've been through the first two. And the only reason I can sit before you and talk about things with good confidence about it is faith and been through a lot. And not to say I know that, but I just say I have been through that, and I can tell you what I experienced, what didn't work, and what I if I look back, do it differently, what I would do differently, but to help prepare people for that. And I'm glad to see fire departments are doing things differently. In recruit school, for example, they're doing marriage and family stuff. They're doing things like, what's his name? The financial guy, Financial Peace University, Dave Ramsey's thing. You're seeing that in a lot of fire academies because guys and gals are getting in over their head financially because they don't make a whole lot of money. So they're giving them biblical principles, if you will.
Sure.
And they're taking out the secular side of it. Whether they like it or not, your Maltese cross is a biblical symbol. But they just don't want to talk about that. But, as long as those guys and gals are getting those skills that you were talking about that I didn't have, because I'd been on the job. I got hired in 98. 2000, I lost my brand new truck, got repossessed because I was working 3 jobs and I broke my leg in a moving company. And when you break your leg on your part-time job, your full-time job puts you on an 8 to 5 at a desk with my leg propped up.
Yeah.
So my bills weren't getting paid, and I had to decide lose my house or lose my truck. So I watched my F-150 get pulled out of the driveway, by the repo man.
Yeah.
And they talk about pride. I didn't ask nobody for help. I had to start over, and I wasn't ready for any of that stuff. So yeah, I was young and definitely physically was in the best shape of my life back then, but I didn't know the challenges I was going to face in being in a career department. And back then we had close to 600 people, about 500 and something people.
Oh, wow.
Now the department's pushing 1,100. They're trying to hire 100 people this year.
Nice.
So it grew a lot in that time frame. But yeah, to summarize, I was not ready, and I learned the hard way, as they say.
You mentioned getting beat up in middle school. That I had the same exact experience. I got transferred to a new school. I didn't have any friends. My parents moved us to a different county, basically. And like first couple days, no friends. I got beat up. Like this kid, I was just devastated. Took it home. It doesn't haunt me anymore, but it haunted me for a long time. And that was the beginning of what I didn't know was this unconscious self-doubt. I just started to not believe in myself. And then I made it to the gym like you did.
Yeah,
and I put on my armor.
Well, see, that's a tough thing, though, because your esteem is determined by someone else. And I had a kid beat me up every day for a year.
Yeah.
And drove me in a dark place. And I went home after getting out of that dark place, and we had those concrete weights. You see DP weights they used to sell.
Yeah.
And I was downstairs in the basement with the rowing machine and the weights, listening to Bon Jovi, and all I could think about was punching that kid's face in for all summer. And I went back to school, and this kid got held back I don't know how many times. He never even graduated high school, sadly.
Yeah.
He saw me first day of my 8th grade year and followed me to the bathroom. And I'm standing at the urinal, and he comes up beside me and grabs my head and does that. And I beat him mercilessly in that bathroom until he ran down the hallway with me chasing him. Keep in mind, he beat me up for a year.
Yeah.
Never got in trouble. I beat him up one time, and I got suspended. And I learned that day, I'm like, look, I sat here and drank this cup full of anger, revenge, all that whole year. Didn't talk to anybody, didn't ask for help. And all I could think about was how I could get even. And when I got even, it did not make me feel any better at all. Matter of fact, I wanted to do it again. So you realize that hole that was created that you talk about, you can't fill it with that. I became the bully. It's not good to become what you hate. You're talking about being there and having that dark place. That is not a good place to be. So I learned that, and that actually led me down the road to anger management later in life.
Okay.
All the things that kind of stay there and then creep out later in life. It's not a good place to be. And the kids today are way meaner than what you and I have dealt with, because now they can persecute them through their phone 24/7 and create all kind of scarring to them. So for me, I'm very similar. And, I learned that my self-esteem cannot be based on how much muscle I carry, how much I could bench, how far I could run, or who I could beat up, which was very few. It had to be that he valued me first, and that my family loved me. And that's my value comes from that. My dad said values determine relationships. What do you value? Right? And I was valuing the wrong thing. And I, 13, 14-year-old kid, what do you know at that age? You just know what you feel. And without parental support, I don't know about you, but I was more of a latchkey kid.
I was too.
Parents working, gone.
Yeah.
And not, God bless them, they provided everything I ever needed.
Yeah.
But dad was gone, and then mom was home most of our young years, and then she started working, and she was gone. So come home to empty house. My grandmother was next door, but up till I was right at that age, she passed away. So, you're by yourself, figuring it out on your own, which is not good.
Yeah, not always good. Yeah, my father, he was a full-time fireman, and then my mom was a career woman. She worked as far as I know, and we were the first ones dropped off at Latchkey and the last ones picked up most of the time. Just waiting. And it's those things do weigh on you, and that's something I've learned, that now I've started talking to a therapist. I'm later in my career, 10 years, 12 years into the fire service total, but maybe not 12, 10, 11. Anyways, there was a lot of stuff from then that has crippled me and kept me not valuing the right things. And you mentioned he values you first, God, and then the family values you for who you are. And that's something that took me a long time to realize, that I am enough just the way I am. And that's something I'm just kind of putting my hands on and believing. And so I completely relate to your experience with getting beat up and losing that sense of value and trying to value other things. I had a bad relationship with a barbell. Like, I was doing it for the wrong reasons. And it caught up with me.
At least it wasn't the bar. It was the barbell.
Yeah. And so I might not have had bar problems, but financially I was not prepared for life, and underlying causes. I'm taking responsibility, but I put myself in a bad position financially multiple times, where I had to file bankruptcy. I had a truck repossessed. I was young. I was dumb. I had a job that paid and I had money, but I just wasn't making the right decisions. And then getting married, getting a good career, like a firefighter job, just I didn't know what I was doing financially. I had a credit card, and that was probably the biggest mistake I ever made. Well, that and lying to my wife about it, which was the ultimate sin for me.
Well, my family suffered from that. My dad and mom ultimately divorced over money. They were basically things from each other, and that did not go well. Without getting details of their business, just know that when you are married, if you hide things from each other, you're already divorced. You can't have divorced bank accounts. You can't have divorced issues. You got to be open And like you said, if I lied to my wife about something, our whole marriage is established based on trust. If there's no trust, there's no marriage. And I think you hit on a very important topic, that the majority of firefighters out there today do not know how to manage money. And if they start off already behind because who knows how long they had to work to get that job, and they're working all these extra jobs, and they're in debt like most of us are when we start, whether it's college debt, whether it's life debt, or just making bad decisions debt. Now you're playing catch up, and then you get married, you have kids, or you already have kids. You're playing, as they say, we're doing just enough to stay behind. Not getting foreclosed on the house, but darn close. We said, what did Dave Ramsey say? There's too much month at the end of my money.
Yeah. Yes.
I don't have enough to get there, and I lived that way for a long time. It's very stressful. My wife and I had to come together in one accord on that, and not until we did. Honestly, we struggled until we came together and like, this is our money, our family, our everything. Like my retirement's her retirement, everything. When we did that, it was like two people working on the same problem instead of me working on it, you working on it, and that didn't work out well. I can just tell you that. There was days I couldn't stop at McDonald's and get my daughter something off the dollar menu.
Sure.
And I'm working two jobs, and I can't stop because I'm paycheck to paycheck, credit card to credit card. That's no way to live. And you look like you're living fine. Yeah. You got house, cars, and everything. But
externally.
But internally you're falling apart. And that causes a lot of undue stress in my house. So I definitely relate to you on that, because I think there are more firefighters. When I talk about my program, The Ultimate House Fire, we talk about finances, and that the majority of firefighters are in financial trouble or have been in financial trouble. And the cost of living isn't getting cheaper. Childcare is more than a mortgage. It's insane what things cost, and then the average firefighter does not make enough money. If you start in a certain department in Texas, you can apply for food stamps the next day.
Oh wow!
And a very large one at that. Yeah,
I did not know that.
Yeah, I mean, you're below the poverty line, and you've got a career profession job with benefits and making less than $40,000 a year in a town that requires you to make $60,000 to $80,000 to pay your rent. That's what people don't understand about firefighters, police officers. In the town I live in right now, you can go work at the grocery store and make more than a police officer starting. That's insane.
That's insane.
Why I'm gonna go bag groceries? I ain't gonna get shot at. You gotta want to be a cop. You gotta want to be a firefighter, because you sure ain't doing it for money. And like you said, though, it's you can end up in a really bad place really quickly. The part of the stuff I did with the peer support team, I learned the hard way. As a company officer, I would have to sign something called payroll every week, and I would put everybody's paychecks in their boxes, whether it was a copy of the receipt, the direct deposit, or the real paycheck. And I can't tell you how many paychecks I slid in people's boxes that said zero. Yeah, between alimony and loans, they were zeroed out every week. They weren't living off their career job. They were working somewhere else to survive. And that happens everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yeah. So I feel for that, because I've been there like you have, and it is a dark place to be.
Yeah, it's definitely not fun, and we are working on rebuilding that relationship and rebuilding trust. And I in the darkness of having no one, and discussing this with my wife, and showing all my cards, and not having lies or secrets or anything in the fog. Yeah, it has become very obvious to me that I need that financial understanding, and she's been able to help me, and we've got a plan, and I'm doing much better. I've got money in the bank. I can live off multiple checks now. I don't have to worry about when the next one comes. But the stress that lying was causing me internally, and I didn't want to lie, but it was so far gone that I just kept moving through it. But once the pressure of that happened, there was a lot of crying, a lot of tears, and a lot of guilt, and we're still working through it. But that lifted that lie, that secret, that keeping that from my wife that changed internally. I felt like something was clenching my heart and it let go. Obviously still working up a mountain of
Yeah.
of journey, but that was the best step I could have made.
First step in healing comes with confession. It's the most difficult thing anybody does.
Yeah.
Confessing something that is dark or people don't know about you or you don't feel comfortable telling. And we've been on both sides of that in my marriage where I've had to confess my sins, and so did she. Like I told you about, my parents divorced pretty much over money. There was other things, but we ran into the same problems here, and we had some of that too. And I found some things and wasn't happy about it, and we talked about it, but not until we came together and said, this is our money. Like, you'll laugh at this. Our original agreement was I was going to pay the bills for 5 years, the first 5 years of our marriage, and then she was going to pay the bills. So 7 years in our marriage, I'm still paying the bills, and I'm like the tightwad, the guy who doesn't want us to spend money, and
Sure.
we're stressed, right? And she said, well, you said we'd do it for 5 years, it's been 7, why don't you let me do it? I was like, you know what, you're right. So I gave her full access to everything. And for the first year, the first thing she did every week was write the check to the church, paid every bill on time, never had an issue. And for a year, I thought, man, I am just horrible at managing money because we're doing fine. I guess it was just me, you know. I'm taking this on the chin. This is my, I'm the bad money management guy. And then the next year, we had one of those life years. The water heater blew up. The cars needed tires.
Yeah.
The roof started leaking all simultaneously. That's why I do laugh about one thing Dave Ramsey used to teach was you need $1,000 emergency fund to start. I'm like, you can't even buy tires for $1,000.
Right. Can't even buy two tires for that.
No. So she comes to me in tears and says, I understand. And I said, what? She said, I understand why you were so stressed. Because we didn't really have an agreement or a budget or even how we were going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And, I don't know how long it's been now, but she has complete control of the money. And when we started the business, when we had the talk, when she came home from working, I told her I wanted her to work with me. She said she wouldn't work for me, work with me. You know, that I told her I would put the money that she was making teaching back in the bank account. And she has access to everything, every financial statement, all my social media accounts. She has access to see it all.
Sure.
There's nothing I can hide from her. It's done that for a reason. It's accountability purposes.
Right.
You know, the only thing I don't have access to is the Amazon Prime account. I don't know why, but everything else, she says it so she can buy things without, surprise me. But we had to do that together, and that took a lot of work. Like you said, that didn't happen overnight. We had to climb up. We had to borrow money out of 401k, pay debt off, then had to pay that off. Then I did it again, and had to pay it off again, which was not fun. By the way, you can only borrow on your 401k twice. Just FYI.
Just so y'all know, yeah.
You're done. Just a little life lesson. Because you want to go back and hit that bank account again, they tell you no.
Okay, good to know.
And when you retire, if you owe on it, they make you pay it off. Just so you know. Because, went through that too. So you're not the only one who's made mistakes and struggles. Because, like I said, I would wager if you went through the list of problems that all firefighters face, every one of them would say money was one of them. Guaranteed.
Yeah.
It's a stress that this world you're guaranteed to have unless you just are a wizard with money and had money to begin with. So.
Right. So you mentioned one thing that really caught my ears: accountability. And when I think of accountability, I've had conversations with people, and my recommendation is giving up personal accountability. Like, we do not need to hold ourselves accountable. We need to allow someone else to hold ourselves accountable, because we kind of find that we're not super good at it. At least I wasn't holding myself accountable. So I try to give up accountability. And talking about accountability and faith, how do you go about that with your God, your faith? What does that accountability look like for you within the confines of your life, your marriage, fire service, but between you and your God? And God.
Accountability with God is probably the most difficult thing that nobody wants to talk about, because Whether you admit it or not, he knows what you did, he knows what you thought, and what you hid from others, he knows it.
Mm-hmm.
So what I hide in the dark, he knows about.
Right.
So if I don't go to him with it, it just sits there. And then that inhibits me as a man, it's my faith. It hinders my prayer life. If I have something that I'm not going to him about and I'm keeping it here, as my dad says, God won't answer a prayer that you won't give to him. Right?
Sure.
So when it comes to accountability, everybody wants Jesus as Savior. Few people want him as Lord. Think about that statement.
Okay.
People don't want a boss. People don't want people to say, these are the things that you should follow, to do, to live a life that honors me, a life of gratitude, not regulation, not the 10 Commandments, the rules that keep you in a fence, that keep you from having fun. I'm talking about there are certain things that he set up to basically save us and to keep us from hurting ourselves. Kind of like the love of money, for one, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, nothing wrong with having money. There is something wrong with loving it and seeking it above all else. But accountability with God, whether you like it or not, we're all accountable. I always tell people all day long, between an atheist and a Christian, one of us is right. And when we get there, I would rather find out there wasn't a God and I lived my life good than to get there and go, uh-oh, there is a God, and now I got to answer.
Yep.
So your choice. You can go down the rabbit hole of accountability when it comes to all of that. But for me, what I've learned is this, and nobody likes to hear this, so bear with me.
Understood.
Nobody's worthy, brother. Think of it this way. You ever attended a firefighter's funeral? One who died in line of duty?
One.
It's a tough experience. No matter how they died, it is a tough experience. And to think that somebody gave their life for someone else they didn't meet, didn't know, may not even like them, who knows? And they died to either save someone's life or try to save some of their property. That very example was set by somebody that I believe in. And he died for people who spit on him, who beat him, right? And didn't believe in him. And his last words were, Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. Besides, it is finished. So he forgave people while they were killing him. Now, I want to ask you this. Think of the person that you have had the most difficult experience with in your life, that you can't be in the same room with, that you mention their name, it drives your blood pressure up. Whether it's a person you know or just a person in life. Now imagine that person dying for you. How do we square ourselves with that? Now, I'm the bad guy no matter what. Because people don't like to say, I can live a good life. Yes, you can. You can have an altruistic nature and be good enough in your opinion. But in the end, it's not about opinion. It's about the fact that all human beings are inherently sinful from day one. Baby cries because baby wants what it wants. You know, my daughter was 2 when she had chocolate all over her face. I said, "Did you eat that chocolate chip cookie?" And she goes, "No, I did not teach that child to lie." Okay,
Right.
She did it on her own. It's a concept of original sin. You can argue it all you want. Human beings want what they want, and they will do bad things if not given good guidance. And some will still do bad things, right?
Right.
And if you don't have a transcendent moral anchor, something outside of yourself to guide you, to hold you accountable, to pull you back, if it's just a politician, a group, or a person you look to, how often will those disappoint you? As you said, I can't hold myself accountable. I tell myself to eat right and work out all the time. Do I hit that goal every day?
Right.
No. I do a lot better now I'm retired. But accountability comes with a mindset where the proverb says, in a multitude of counselors, there is safety. In other words, if I have several people who know what I'm trying to achieve and they see me not doing that, what do you think they can do for me? Psh, hey, come back over here.
Wake up.
No, you're not getting away with 8 reps. You got to do 12 like the rest of us, right?
Sure.
I need that. I need my spouse to call me out and hold me accountable. I need my daughter to go, Daddy, didn't you say not to do that? Right?
Yeah.
I need to, and when you talk about God, that's the highest accountability there is. And you and I can't live a good enough life to please him. That's why Jesus was sent. If you study the entire system of how they used to do things, they had to make constant sacrifices for everything they did. And you know what's funny about that? We do that now. We try to make amends for everything we do. I'm sorry, flowers, cards, gifts. Right. Those are sacrifices to make amends for something that we did. And the greatest sacrifice he desires is a broken and contrite heart. Because if you said it best, until I came to her and confessed it, that's when your healing began, right? I can send you a card. I can say I'm sorry. But if I don't mean it and there's no change, there's a firefighter who died back in 2020. His name was Richard Sheltra. And I quote him. He used to say, "Don't be sorry, just improve." What's a sorry if there is no change?
Right.
Right. If I tell you I'm sorry for hurting you and then I do it again tomorrow, there's no change in that. It's like we talked with our daughter. You said you're going to do that. You didn't do it. I'm sorry. Well, sorry doesn't cut it if we've asked you 20 times this week and you're still not doing it. Accountability is huge. And my friend John Dixon says it best. You'll love this. I'll close with this. Everybody wants accountability until it's their turn to be accountable. Right?
Absolutely.
And if you want to practice accountability, you said it best. It is not a singular thing. I can't rely on myself to hold myself accountable, to do all the things. I need a group, and I need to rely on him. I need my wife involved in it. It needs to be a lifestyle of accountability, whether it's your morals, your values, your disciplines. Because without it, we're going to cheat. I promise you we will. We'll find a loophole. We'll do something to get around it and still act like we did it. And that's not it.
So the lifestyle. I came to you. I'm new to God and to faith, and I've read books on Buddhism and Taoism and things of that nature and the universe. Where does somebody like me, who is looking to start learning and understanding, and feels this pull, where do I turn? What do I do next? I'm here speaking to you. This has been a big step for me.
Well, spiritually seeking is a good thing, and I encourage people to read and look at things. But then I also challenge you to lay all those faiths out before you and ask which one of those faiths, out of all those people, died for their people and then rose again. And in his word says, he lives today, and says that if you believe in him, you shall not perish and have eternal life. None of them. There's reincarnation. There's lots of good things in all of them, if you look at the good parts. But you can find the bad parts in all of them if you want to focus on that. And I'm not discouraging someone who believes in a different faith or a different philosophy. What I do discourage is people picking and choosing parts of different faiths and claiming to be spiritual. No, that's what we call buffet spirituality. I like a lot of grace. I like a lot of forgiveness. I don't like any of this accountability stuff. And I don't like being told I can't live this way. And you will find the majority of people choose a faith or a belief system that justifies their life first instead of having him who justified it. If you're seeking peace and fulfillment, then I would seek Christ. If you're seeking worldly fulfillment and wisdom, you can choose whatever you want to choose. Because in the end, what I've learned is that peace doesn't mean absence of conflict. Peace doesn't mean your bank account's full. Peace doesn't mean your health is always good and your absence of problems. Peace is the feeling, the experience, and the comfort you get from him when all hell's breaking loose. And you, just like that cool, competent incident commander who pulls up on the worst fire you could ever imagine, and picks up the microphone and gives a beautifully calm size up, gives assignments, starts making decisions, and moves smoothly through that entire process. And you never know inside their hearts, like, boom. That's peace. Peace is that feeling that he gives you, the Prince of Peace. It basically, he tells you that in this world you will have tribulation. But take comfort because I have overcome the world. I know that tomorrow I could have who knows what happen, right? and I've had a lot happen to know that.
Yeah.
But for someone who's seeking, I need you to understand, well, why do you think you're seeking in the first place? Who put that feeling in your heart to begin with?
Right.
Right?
No, I fully understand. I can only imagine, and that looking back, again, my experiences have been something that I haven't really openly spoke about. But when I was very young, I was a victim of a sexual abuse as a 5-year-old, and I believe that that knocked me off course. But I'm where I am today, trying to right that ship and get back to a place where I feel that I'm worthy. And so far, talking with you, I believe I've built up this I am enough the way I am, but I am seeking, like you said, and I do believe it is within the realm of Jesus Christ and God. I just don't know what that step looks like. I don't have a lot of it around me. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah, it does. And I'm so sorry that that happened to you, because that's something I'm very familiar with. I can tell you that the people that hurt us the most are often the ones closest to us, because we never see that coming.
Right.
That is a hard pill to swallow. I don't want to invalidate anybody's pain that's been through that. And I think it's a horrible thing to think of someone, taking advantage and harming a child, and then the scarring that happens later in life from that. But I can tell you that my belief is the reason why God's called Father, because you seldom hear of mothers abandoning their children. But absent fathers are probably one of the biggest problems in America.
Sure.
And his word says he will never leave you nor forsake you. And a lot of people think that God has left, when in reality it was us who walked away. And I think in the darkness, when things are really bad, our pain screams out so loud that we can't hear that whisper of him talking to us, in my opinion. And that is very difficult to tell someone that he never left you when your mom or your dad or your uncle or whoever it was did that horrific thing. Why would God allow that? That's why people have problems with God, is because they blame God for the horrific, terrible nature of humanity. And I can't square that. I can't tell you why. I can't tell you why Stephen Curtis Chapman's song, I'll Dance with Cinderella, says, I will dance with Cinderella, because I don't know when this song is going to end.
Right.
And he talks about his son driving in the driveway and running over his 3-year-old daughter and killing her right in front of him. And he gets in a car with his daughter in his arms, and his son's screaming. And he says, I love you, son. What kind of father can look at his son after that and have the courage to say that?
Right.
You know where I've seen this? Is people with the utmost faith can exercise love in the face of hate, in the face of tragedy. I watched a family, after zipping their son up in a morgue, go and hug every firefighter that tried to save him that night and tell them they love him. Who does that?
Right.
People who have faith. But I don't want to invalidate anyone who's been through that, or going through that, or have that hurt in their heart. I will say that counseling is an amazing gift. And
Absolutely.
I've been through counseling myself. I did 14 years of counseling, and still have what I call a virtual accountability group. We call it the Firehouse Kitchen Table. That is my version of counseling now, but I do seek it out and I do recommend it. And I don't think that those types of wounds should be just talked about among peers and just pastoral counseling alone. There's that book I mentioned to you when we talked earlier called Caring for People God's Way, talks about that a lot.
Yep.
And I think the holes that are ripped in the fabric of a human soul cannot be healed by medication. It may mask it, but unless you talk to someone and then get guidance and then seek out the one who created you, and then do like David did in the Psalms. David asked some pretty tough questions, screaming at God, how long, O Lord, why will you let this happen? You know, he lost his child. There's things in there that when you look at it, you're like, ooh, and he's calling God out. And, you know, but you got to read that to see that people in the Bible went through horrific stuff. They were not protected from every calamity or circumstance or evil thing that would happen. But I'm telling you, for me, the presence of evil tells me straight up that there would not be a dark unless there is a light. Okay? Because the darkness is merely the absence of light. That's what it is. And without God, there is just darkness. And people want to argue that. They want to talk about evolution and that you're from goo to you, from, you know, everything happens by chance. I don't want to have that kind of mentality. I don't have enough faith to be an atheist, as Lee Strobel says. But you seeking out the fact that there's something on your heart calling that, I would encourage you to pray about it. I would encourage you to seek guidance. I would encourage you to look at some of the books that I sent you in that list.
Yes, sir.
And I would encourage you as a young person, while you still feel that on your heart, do not ignore it. Because the world and the noise and the pain can be so loud that that's all we listen to. And I've had some really good friends who are Christians, who are more devout and dedicated than I am, completely isolate and shut themselves off from the world because they've lost hope. And I can tell you there's one tactic there. It's called isolation.
Yeah.
And if you look at people who spend time in prison, their worst fear is the hole. Because they say, why is that so bad? Because you take away hope. It's total darkness. When you isolate someone who is depressed, they continue to get worse. You isolate someone who has deep, dark thoughts and problems, they get worse. We are wired to be next to each other. If you've ever heard the story of the ember that's separated from the fire, it goes out. You take that same cold, lifeless ember and push it back to the fire, it reignites. We are wired. We are made to be next to people, to encourage us, to give us hope. And that is what I believe God created us for, is to encourage others and give them hope and point them to Him. And you and I don't have the question or the answers to those questions of why someone would do that to you. And I dare not try to answer such a question, because I think it invalidates people. I think it's terrible statements like, you know, it's God's will, or you're not hurting anymore.
Sure.
Or Brene Brown says, rarely does a comforting statement begin with the following words: at least they're not doing this. At least you're not. No, don't do that.
Yeah.
So I would tell you to seek and you shall find, which is what God's word tells you to do. But don't let anybody else get in the way of that. Don't listen to the media. Listen to your heart and get good guidance and read and seek and pray about it. And you will know. You will know. Look at Lee Strobel's book, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. He was an atheist. His wife became a Christian, and he put 2 charts up because he got so tired of hearing her talk about it. And he said, this is the case for Christ. This is the case against Christ. He said, I'm a journalist. I'm evidence-based. He said, I'm going to prove, does he exist? Does he not exist? And he said at the end, there was more evidence for Christ than there was against. And he became an evangelist. Now, this was an atheist who didn't believe, and he did his own investigation. He wasn't tainted by anybody. So that's what I encourage people to do, is you have to do that part on your own. I can encourage you. I can point you to the right resources. But in the end, that relationship is between you and God.
Right.
Right? They say in peer support, our role is to walk with that person to get them the care they need. I'm not the answer. And that's the same relationship as a Christian. I'm trying to walk you towards Him, to point you towards Him so that you can have your own relationship. Don't have my relationship. My relationship needs work. Right. You want your own relationship. But that's what I'm sorry for long-winded, but what you told me touched my heart. And I feel for people to go through that more than anything.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, and that amongst all of the other challenges that we all face in life has put me in the position where I am today, basically sitting down with people like you, experts in the field, just trying to let other people know that I'm a firefighter. You're a firefighter. We're just doing this service-based profession to help other people, and we're just humans. And I'm no better or worse than anybody else. And I have gone through a lot of struggles too, just like we all have. And you don't have to be alone or feel alone, because you're not. You're sitting right next to somebody who's probably got just as much on their plate that they're not telling you as you. And I think in the fire service, if we can break those walls down and we can open up and start, just like you said, asking for help and being there and sitting in silence with those people, I think that's a great thing. But speaking to professional counselors and therapists is the move that I made within the last 45 days. I think I'm almost at my 2-month mark with a therapist.
Good.
And I've learned a lot about myself, experienced a lot of healing, plenty to go. But one real interesting thing is I'm 38 and I got diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactive disorder. And a lot of looking backwards on top of trauma and poor financial decisions and disorganization and lacking structure. I've been struggling. I've made it this far, but now I feel like I'm honing in the process for myself.
Sure.
And the faith piece is the piece that for me is the next evolution to my, not culmination, but just my next version of me. And I really appreciate you coming on to help me discuss that. And I hope the people listening can just take a shred of understanding or appreciation and look into themselves and look at themselves and their wives and ask them what kind of man or woman they want to be, and start making it happen. And for all you guys out there listening, guys and gals, it doesn't get talked about enough, but the faith aspect in this career and in life, but this career is really, really important. And if you don't mind closing us out with just your experience and the benefit that you have with your faith and how it's really structured. And I use the word structure because I need structure in my life and principles and guiding principles. How has it made you a better firefighter and then a better husband? Because I believe that's where this ends. That's just evolving.
My wife said a long time ago, my faith in Andy is based on his faith in God. As long as I see that faith in him, then my faith remains strong in him. You hear your wife say that?
That's powerful.
Talking about accountability. When we were moving here in 2006, I was walking with her. And we used to walk a lot. And one of my friends got caught cheating on his wife, and it shocked me. And I was telling her about it, and she said, all men do it, and you will eventually do it to me. You want to know why she said that? Because I behaved like one guy at work and a completely different guy at home. And you said how faith has guided me. Faith told me that I couldn't be two people. I couldn't be, this individual at work that I wasn't proud of, even though I fit in with the guys, which I've cautioned my daughter about. Don't try to fit in with the world, right? Be you. Be who he's called.
That's huge.
And some of the people I've respected the most in my career, the ones that got up and walked out of the room when something came out on TV or a conversation went a different way, or said, well, I'm glad you talk. I know you talk about him like that, so I know when I walk out of the room, you talk about me that way. Some of those people I respect far greater than the one that sat there and could spread gossip and slander and talk bad about people and talk about the horrible things they do, to their family and brag about it.
Yeah.
My faith has guided me to prevent a tradition in the fire service. Divorce, number one. Alcoholism, I believe, number two. And I believe the other thing it's guided me on is that you spend your whole life working some job. Average is 90,000 hours in a lifetime.
Yeah. Wow.
Did you spend that collecting a paycheck, or did you spend that making a difference? And people will argue that just being a firefighter makes a difference. And I don't disagree with that one bit. You don't have to have my faith to make a difference. However, I can tell you that I've watched more firefighters throw a pair of shoes out of the window without a second thought before they realized that 4-year-old was in the front yard shivering, and that was her only pair of shoes. Because they hadn't been homeless, and they are focused too much on being into the job and into the people they serve. I hear it all the time. It's for them. It's for them. Let me tell you something. It's always been for them, but the reason it was for them is because it started with him. He loved you first, and then he gave you a life with people around you to care for. And if you don't respect that and you're not grateful for that, then you're selfish and you should go work at Walmart or wherever, not at the fire department. Because the fire department means you got to put yourself last. Faith means you got to put yourself last. When you say I do, it means I don't do all these other things.
Right.
It means I am second or last. I wrote a leadership prayer and it says, Lord, let me get up first and let me go to bed last. And I don't always do that. But if you don't put your spouse, your children, people in general above your own personal needs, then you don't know what it is to follow him. Because he came here not to be served. The King of Kings, God's Son, did not come down here and say, bow down to me. He came down here and washed people's feet, touched the nastiest people in the world, hung out with prostitutes, tax collectors, and healed them. He didn't hang out with them and affirm them. He changed their very existence by simply being with them. How your faith changes you? Your faith changes you when you pick up the homeless man for the 50th time that year, and instead of cussing him out, you as the company officer wipe him off and get him something to eat and say, hey, Joe, I'm sorry that you're dealing with this. Because you know his name, you know his family. You treat the lowest of the low with the same respect, from the crack house to the country club, from the high rises to the worst places in your neighborhoods that you have to respond to. You treat them all with dignity and respect, not because you are a firefighter, because he lives in your heart, and you know in the depths of your soul that if you didn't have him, just like in the Bible, you're laying on the side of the road, and the religious people walked around the hurt man and left him there. But the Samaritan, the people they looked down for, stopped, aided him, bandaged his wounds, and took him to a place and paid for him to be cared for. A complete stranger that the world looked down on took time to do that because the Samaritan cared. I think the difference is, a friend of mine calls it the curse of caring, is you have a burden in your heart, a calling that you've already talked about. It cannot be placed there by worldly desires or media or any of this garbage that we're all infected with today. We're too busy trying to divide each other and talk about why each group is wrong instead of pointing them to the person who made us all right. And that's where we need to start, is realize if you want to serve more than anyone else, and you want to, I saw this on a dry erase board picture before you and I came on the show. It said serving is like faith. You go into it blind and expect nothing in return. When you helped that person get up off the floor, you did CPR on that dead woman that you knew you weren't going to get back. When you brought that dead body out of the house, but you know they weren't going to make it, but you did it so it gave them closure. When you stopped and helped that man with a problem that you shouldn't have had to do because it's not part of your job. You cut his grass after his medical call. You went by and checked on his wife after they went to the hospital. All that means you went above and beyond what everybody screams about, which is the minimum standard. And the minimum standard is being executed in our life today, and it's called the New World Order of we're just going to be nice to each other. Nice is minimum. Servanthood is stepping above that line and going that extra mile and doing that for your wife, for your neighborhood, for your family, and for those you serve. And when they say, why did Chris do that? I don't understand. Chris, he didn't have to do that. Why did he do that? Then you have an opportunity, Chris, at that point to tell them why you did it. Because you're living a life like I am. Right now, I'm a nobody from nowhere, okay? I grew up in a farm community with nothing. And I've been around the world and spoken to thousands of people. I train 10,000 people a year. I train some of the major manufacturers. I have opportunities that I don't deserve, Chris. I have a wife who loves me. I have a daughter who loves me, who has the same problem you just mentioned, by the way. And they all love me despite what I know about myself.
Yeah.
Now, why is that? Can people not look past themselves and past their own personal pride and realize I don't deserve what I have. And I am so grateful I don't get what I deserve. That's where we need to begin, man. Begin your life each day realizing today could be my last.
100%.
I'm going to live my life gratefully. I'm going to hug my wife until she says, let go of me. I'm going to pester my daughter until she says, stop.
Right.
And I'm going to live my life happily. Not because I got everything figured out, because I know right now you and I have a moment to do that. And there's nothing that forbids us from being kind to one another. Serve boldly and with love and with a way that doesn't make sense to the world. And you will attract people to you in ways you cannot even imagine. And it's without ego. It's without recognition. It's without reward. It's because you already got a reward. And you're going to find it if you keep seeking. That's what I have for you.
Well, sir, that very moving. And it leaves me speechless. And I am so grateful that you've made time to come on today and share your experience and journey through the fire service and with the details of your personal relationship and your faith. And I appreciate that very much. I have a lot of homework to do regarding my path forward in the faith realm. And I plan to grab some books, and I'm going to put those books that you've sent me in my show notes so everybody else can see those. And I want to recap today's
That's a good one for
experience
you and
today.
your wife. Right there.
Okay.
Good friends of
You,
mine.
me, and our broken tools. All right.
Corley and Amanda Moore. Awesome.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. He's got a lot of good stuff.
The book I mentioned to you we talked about, there's the cover if you were
Okay.
we said about teaching and helping others.
Yep.
Saying It Well by Chuck Swindoll. I went and dug them up before the podcast.
Oh, excellent. I appreciate that. And it's just an experience that I haven't had. I am super motivated and expect to learn a lot. And I just from the bottom of my heart, I'm very grateful for your time and your wisdom on all of this. And this conversation could probably continue for a couple more hours. We could have talked about purpose and principles and priorities, and maybe we'll get to do that in the future.
To be continued.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody, this is Priority Traffic Podcast. You were listening to Chief Andy Starnes, and hopefully you guys have something to take away from this, and a little motivation, and a little bit maybe peace, and maybe a little bit of heaviness in your heart to get up and make a difference and serve boldly. Sir, I appreciate your time.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate you. Good luck.
All right, sir. Have a great day.
Take care.
That's a wrap on today's episode of Priority Traffic Podcast. Thank you for tuning in and for your commitment to growth, both in your life and in service to others. Remember, this community is here for you, offering support and strategies to help you thrive. Keep the conversation going by connecting with us online. To access more resources, follow us on social media platforms for your daily dose of encouragement and to share this podcast with your colleagues who might benefit from our collective journey towards wellness. Till next time, take the insights from today, let them guide you, and continue to prioritize your well-being because you deserve to lead a fulfilling life on and off duty. Stay safe, stay well.